Under my leadership, America's policy is unambiguous to terrorists who harm or intend to harm any American. We will find you. We will eliminate you. We will always protect our diplomats, service members, all Americans, and our allies. For years, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and its ruthless Quds Force under Soleimani's leadership has targeted, injured, and murdered hundreds of American civilians and servicemen. The recent attacks on U.S. targets in Iraq, including rocket strikes that killed an American and injured 4 American servicemen very badly, as well as a violent assault on our embassy in Baghdad, were carried out at the direction of Soleimani. Soleimani made the death of innocent people his sick passion, contributing to terrorist plots as far away as New Delhi and London. Today we remember and honor the victims of Soleimani's many atrocities, and we take comfort in knowing that his reign of terror is over.
Now, what's interesting about this is Donald Trump didn't even know who the hell this guy was when he ran for president in 2015. The folks at Fox News were actually joking about it. What's also interesting about this is that he calls him the #1 terrorist in the world. That's actually not true. So he was simply making those things up. The question now is what happens in that region. I want to bring in our panel here. This is a huge story because, again, it raises concerns among many Americans in terms of, are we now going to be entering into another war in the Middle East? Julian Boykin, he's with the Young Republicans of Southern Maryland. Dr. Nyambe Carter, Howard University Department of Political Science. Mustafa Santiago Ali, former senior advisor, environmental justice for the EPA. Dr. Carter, I'm going to start with you. This is somebody who has said that we should be pulling out of the Middle East. Supposedly, Jared Kushner is negotiating a Middle East peace plan. This action right here completely throws all of that out of the window. Iran has made it clear they're going to strike back. So if you are American troops, if you are Americans living in that region, there is great fear because you have no idea what is going to happen next when it comes to the Iranians.
Absolutely. I mean, they made it clear that peace is off the table, right? At this point, they want revenge. I think he has done this without really thinking about what the destabilizing effects are going to be on the region, right? I mean, there's one thing to sort of be strong and have a show of force. It's another thing to now plunge ourselves into another war with domestic considerations for the people who are on the ground there, right? This is going to have ramifications, not just for Iran, but that whole region. So I think people better buckle up because there are going to be more deployments, right? They are already strengthening the number of troops that are in the region. So this is about to be an escalation, and it's going to escalate very quickly, I think.
I want to go right now to MSNBC analyst Malcolm Nance. He, of course, serving long time in U.S. intelligence, author of the book, The Plot to Betray America, How Team Trump Embraced Our Enemies, Compromised Our Security, and How We Can Fix It. Malcolm, put into context exactly what has taken place in the last 24 hours.
Well, what's happened here is that we've seen the United States take a very, very decisive step, is a polite way of putting it, towards essentially war with Iran. This goes back 1 week ago when suspected Iraqi militias in Iraq who were trained by Iran were accused by the United States government of carrying out a rocket attack on a base named K1 in the vicinity of Kirkuk, Iraq. This killed one contractor, wounded several service members. From there, they decided that this was backed by Iran, that Iran apparently gave the Iraqis the weapons and equipment to do this, which, you know, when you're talking about an Iraqi militia, is a little laughable because the Iraqis are washed with weapons. From that point, the United States vowed that they would have retribution against whoever did this, and that's apparently when the planning to kill the top Iranian general, Qasem Soleimani, a man who has been involved in Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps terrorism since the 1980s. Soleimani is not just a general. He is like a combined equivalent of the vice president, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and, has rock star status, almost equal to Barack Obama, for example, because he is also the man that mobilized Iraq's militias from a ragtag group of people into a 500,000-man force that defeated and pushed ISIS completely out of Iraq. He was very public. He was on television all the time, very popular. And apparently the United States, carrying out a drone strike, executed him. The deputy commander of a gentleman by the name of Al-Muhandis, or the engineer, as it's translated, who was the commander of the Kata'ib al-Hezbollah, the organization that carried out the protests around the embassy the other day and laid siege to the building. They were both killed in the airstrike, and there have been reports that commanders from two other militias were arrested and seized by U.S. forces.
So Malcolm, explain
apparently
this.
The United States decided that we would go directly at the Iranians and essentially wipe out their most popular figure outside of the Ayatollah Khamenei himself.
Malcolm, explain this. So Donald Trump stands before the cameras in Florida and says this was the #1 terrorist in the world. That's not true.
It really goes to how the conservatives define terrorism, right? Anyone that they don't like, who may have been involved in activities which were nefarious, they can do that. Now, I have been in this business since the early 1980s, and Qasem al-Soleimani came on my radar in 1986 when we were carrying out activities to rescue and find hostages that were being seized by the Lebanese Hezbollah terrorist group. He is a terrorist in the sense that as a sponsor of state terrorism,
right,
where he would work with militia groups, he would work with state proxies like Shia rebels in Yemen, Shia rebels in Syria, who would carry out acts of terrorism. In that sense, if you say he is as a state sponsor of terrorism, yes, but he is not Osama bin Laden. He is a state figure. So, there are people in this world who would point out U.S. activities and would say essentially that Mike Pence is the same thing.
But you just said something critical here. You just said something because you said that he was the one who put together the group that drove ISIS out of Iraq. And this is the piece where I think Americans not really understanding what in the hell is actually happening. So here you have, again, in this country historically, because first of all, if we want to go all the way back to Mossadegh in '53, where the Iranians, there was a time when the Iranians loved America, but when we helped what is basically British Petroleum, BP, today overthrow Mossadegh, then Iran, and put the Shah of Iran, that's what changed everything. But what's interesting here is that what you're dealing with in this region is that you have, at one time we loved Saddam because he hated Iran, then we were down with Iran because they hated Iraq. Here you have an Iranian general who's driving ISIS out, and we're supposed to hate ISIS. And I think that's the piece that people don't understand. You have these different loyalties as that's happening there because different people have different interests based upon what is happening in their country.
Well, in this circumstance, you're absolutely right. But you would have to understand this is when Iraq was invaded by ISIS, where they came from northern Syria and then drove almost down to the top of Baghdad. Iraq was working almost principally by itself, and then with the air assistance of the United States. And this is where enters Soleimani. He runs the Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran. They are a massive paramilitary force of, almost 500,000 men, scalable in wartime up to 2 to 3 million men. And the IRGC's mission in this case was to assist Iraq and whatever they need as Shia religious brothers, so to speak, right? They all come from the Shia faith. He came with weapons, equipment, organization, and literally organized this ragtag band of Iraqi militias that were essentially guys with guns and turned them into an army and had them fight side by side with the Iraqi army when they retook the city of Mosul and then drove the ISIS out in the northwest and the west. Soleimani worked in coordination with us because, of course, he was working with the militias. He was on the battlefield all the time. He was a very hands-on general, and he worked with these Iraqis to help them lose. I mean, they lost thousands of men, but they drove ISIS out of Iraq. So in that circumstance, we needed him. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't awash with blood all over his hand. I mean, Soleimani was a bad actor. He worked in Iran's interest. He did not work in our interest. And of course, after our mutual interest was ended, he went back on the hit list. Now, that doesn't mean that we should have struck him when we did, where we did, because what happens in this administration is they carry out acts without thinking about the consequences. They have no consequence management skills. And this could literally turn the Middle East aflame.
And so Malcolm, so explain that for the folks who are watching, because I think what you have is you've got Fox News over here, yay, Trump took him out, and then saying, well, these other presidents, they wouldn't do that. Well, there was a reason why a President Barack Obama or President Bush or President Clinton or other presidents would not target a top Iranian general, because they understand proportionality.
Yeah.
Because you have to not just say, well, if we take him out and his aides and a couple other people, and then everything is all done. No, you got to be thinking 10 steps ahead, that if we take him out, then what's the ripple effect? How does that now alter the course of history? That is the issue here that I think people have to understand.
Well, certainly, you would imagine that any normal White House would have this gamed out using experts, using the State Department, diplomats, and they would try to understand what the secondary and tertiary effects of any of their decisions are. However, when you get a situation that's much, much similar to the George W. Bush decision to just go into Iraq and wipe that country out, Saddam Hussein and its leadership out, where they literally hid all of their operational planning away from diplomats, and literally, when I was in Iraq, said they didn't want any experts or anyone that could speak the language or understand the culture. So this is where you get disasters from. And what's happening here, Soleimani, although he deserved that missile, it's the secondary and tertiary effects and, quadrary effects as they come. Right now, the ball is in Iran's court. They have the option of setting the Middle East on fire or being a little magnanimous about this and exacting their revenge later. And that could be any number of proxies. But, you have the new commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, who was the deputy of Soleimani. He didn't have the political stature of Soleimani, but he still controls all the weapons, all the men, and all the terrorism levers, and essentially is a power unto himself in Iran. He has already sworn absolute revenge, and it will take place at a time of his choosing.
And what should be the concern of Americans? Because I think when you hear people say, oh my goodness, there might be war with Iran, is that overstating this?
Well, no, because that depends entirely on Iran. Now, as we've seen, proportionality has gone completely out the window with this administration. And it's almost as if they were looking for a fight. They're spoiling for a fight. You could move to a point where you could have a war that is direct, open confrontation with Iraq, with Iran, if Iran so chooses. And I have been active in operations against Iran since, Beirut in 1983, when they assisted in building, the bomb that killed 243 Marines. And I've been in direct combat with Iran, direct naval combat in 1988, and been bombarded by Iranian missiles by Iranian militias in Iraq. So we haven't had a circumstance since the 80s where we would get into a face-to-face confrontation, because Iran doesn't think it's in their interest. But they certainly have the capability of defending themselves. Let me make this clear to your viewer. When we invaded Iraq, we were fighting 25% of the population, about 5 million people. There were 80,000 terrorist combatants. They managed to kill, over 7 years, 4,493 service members and wound over 20,000. Iran is a homogenous nation state of 85 million people. They have the capacity to spool up the number of men between 18 and 35 in a matter of weeks. And that number is almost 30 million men. So this isn't something we should take lightly. This is a very large nation. It has a history that's almost 4,000 years old. They have a regional doctrine and strategy that they're adhering to. And killing General Soleimani, they do not want to destroy their own infrastructure. They will make sure that their revenge is exacted quietly, hopefully, and most likely the Iraqi Shia militiamen will carry out this revenge, not the Iranian army or the Iranian armed forces.
Last question for you. How problematic is it that Donald Trump told Israel about this action before it happened, that we've already communicated with Russian leaders, yet he is still yet to tell the Gang of Eight, Republicans and Democrats, talking with Senator Lindsey Graham and Matt Gaetz and some others, that's not the same as the congressional leadership.
Look, Donald Trump does not care about the Constitution of the United States. He doesn't care about the organization of the government of the United States. Let's be frank. Donald Trump is an autocrat. He wants to be an autocrat. His best friends are an autocrat. He may as well just call himself, King Donald I, because he chooses to run this government like he is a monarch, like he's a king. And he doesn't seem to understand nor believe that all of the trappings around him, the very people that built the White House, John Adams, risked their lives to fight people like Donald Trump, to fight against this monarchical mindset. He does not care. And now that he's been impeached, he's starting to understand it's just a piece of paper, so long as he has the Republican Party in his back pocket. And at this point, that makes him dangerous, because he flaunts not just the norms of the presidency of the United States, he flaunts the norms of decent society. And to him, having a war with brown people on the other side of the world, to him is a win, because his people are inherently racist, and they take U.S. policy to carry out racist activity. We've seen this time and again, documented, confirmed behavior. So with that in mind, and the belief that he is unaccountable to the nation, he will carry out a war and do whatever he wants. And hopefully that Iran's retaliation isn't so severe that he starts thinking about applying the use of nuclear weapons, because he is an absolute monarch. He has the authority, so long as the target is not something crazy like France. He has the authority to target and use nuclear weapons as he sees fit, because the people of the United States, in their infinite wisdom, chose him as president. That's how the rules work.
I know I had a final question for me, my panelists. You have any questions for Malcolm? Anyone? All right, cool. Malcolm Nance, man, always a pleasure. Again, folks, you definitely want to get his book. It is called he's the author of The Plot to Betray America, How Team Trump Embraced Our Enemies, Compromised Our Security, and How We Can Fix It. Malcolm, thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
All right, go to our panel here. Dr. Carter, you were speaking before we had to go to Malcolm. I want to pull in Mustafa here. Look, presidents have taken actions to retaliate when Americans have been attacked. But to Malcolm's point, you better be thinking about the 5th and 6th and 7th, 8th and 9th and 10th steps. There's no evidence this administration can think beyond the first action.
Yeah, I mean, it's reckless. It's reckless policies, dangerous policies. And it's interesting also, you've noticed that the generals who were part of the administration before, who may have been able to, quell some of this, to provide that advice and recommendations that's important to any leader to say, this is not the move to do, they're no longer there in that administration. No one has a voice to be able to help make change happen. And I appreciate what Malcolm was saying also by breaking this down for folks, because folks don't actually understand, the infrastructure that's there in the Middle East that will be damaged, that will be destroyed, and it will have repercussions here in this country. And also, since I come from a climate background, I understand when you start blowing up oil wells, how that will also impact the environment. There are so many things that will be connected to this set of, like I said before, reckless movements that will play out for generations to come.
Julian, Speaker Nancy Pelosi issued this statement where she said, go to my iPad, please. American leaders' highest priority is to protect American lives and interests. We cannot put the lives of American service members, diplomats, and others further at risk by engaging in provocative and disproportionate actions. Tonight's airstrike risks provoking further dangerous escalation of violence. America and the world cannot afford to have tensions escalate to the point of no return. She then says the full Congress must be immediately briefed on this serious situation and on the next steps under consideration by the administration, including the significant escalation of the deployment of additional troops to the region. Fair or unfair?
That's fair. I believe that, Nancy Pelosi, if she wants to be briefed, she should be briefed.
No, not that she wants to be briefed. She's the Speaker of the House. She's part of that gang of 8.
What I'm saying is, if she's saying, hey, I want to be briefed on how this decision was determined, who made it, what evidence do you have, I want to see it, then, the Trump administration, they should show that. Now, when they're going to show it, I don't know. I can't speak on that. But she's part of the 8. She should be entitled to that information. So I'm not saying she should not have privy to it. So she is entitled to the information. When she gets it, I don't know.
I don't think, Dr. Carter, they care. I think they have no intentions on doing that. And again, he pulls in Senator Lindsey Graham, who is not a part of the Republican leadership in the Senate. He's the chair of a committee. He's not the Speaker of the House. Excuse me. He's not the majority leader. He's not in the House Republican leadership conference or the caucus there. And so, again, to Malcolm's point, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
His whole deal is, I'm the president. I don't care what y'all think.
I mean, the truth is, I think I think we were all so quiet because what Malcolm lays out is the very real possibilities that are here. But he does have a responsibility if he's going to be committing troops, right? He has to go to Congress within the next 48 hours. But I think more than that, all of the people who could have been stopgaps between this moment yesterday, right, that happened over the last 25 hours, and where we may be headed, were all kept out of the process. Because he does not care about potentially de-escalating a situation, right? All he knows is respond, respond, respond. But as Malcolm rightly points out, this is going to have larger implications for that region that we're not even thinking about, not to mention the size of this potential skirmish, right? Osama bin Laden was a person who was acting kind of outside of the bounds of the state. But now this is where diplomacy was supposed to come in. We're dealing with another nation, not some rogue actors, right? Not some outside militia group. This was a military official, right? A government official.
Right.
So now we actually have a moment where we're going to have to contend with another government, right? And that's a very different situation than we were in with 9/11.
But we should also look at the difference between this administration and the last administration. So if you look at the Iran nuclear deal, there were a number of other countries that were a part of that.
Not just the United States.
Exactly.
Multiple nations.
Yes. And with this administration, you know, they reached out to Israel, and I understand that conversation that happened, but to the best of our knowledge, there was no conversation with the United Kingdom. There was no conversation with France. There was no conversation with Germany, which were a part of that nuclear deal that President Trump decided to remove us from a couple of years ago in 2018. And now we're in 2020, and he has now assassinated this leader, somebody who, you know, some have labeled him in his respective country as a rock star. So you know that's going to mobilize many young men to want to get engaged in whatever types of actions that are going to happen. And there are too many soft targets that are all over the place that will now be vulnerable based upon the actions that this president decided to make. And he has to carry the water on this for all the lives that will be lost. And here's the other thing that really gets me sometimes is that his sons are not of military age. So they're probably not going to be engaged in whatever might transpire here. And of course, we know his record. My family has served since World War II all the way up. But when he had the opportunity to actually serve, he decided to go in the opposite direction.
Mr. Bone Spurs.
Exactly.
The last point here, and I think that this is really, what is so critical here. Most Americans, and I made that clear when I started with Malcolm. Most Americans have no idea what the hell the reality is in the Middle East. Have absolutely none. Again, if you look at American history, when we were friendly with Iraq, supplied Saddam Hussein with weapons because he was fighting our enemy, Iran. Then all of a sudden, we started hating Saddam Hussein, and so we started working with the Iranians to fight him. Now you're dealing with, remember, we were funding the folks in Afghanistan when supplying them with weapons, with all sort of different things to take down the Russians in Afghanistan. Boom, all of a sudden they flip, then turn against us. And it's understanding, what is happening. Look at Syria. We sit here, pull out of Syria to help the Turkish president, but then we screw the very people who were helping in Syria. That emboldens the Turks who hated the Turks hated the Turkish president, hated the folks that we were working with. He wanted to take them out. The Syrian president want to take them out as well. You're sitting here saying, okay, whose side should we be on? And that's part of the problem here, is that on any given day, who might be your friend on Monday is your enemy on Tuesday. And they might be your friend again on Wednesday. It might flip back to being your enemy on Thursday, and then you friendly on Friday. And that's the fundamental problem we have here. And not only that, we are in Iraq as guests of the Iraqi government. If the Iraqi government says, y'all got to go, we can't say, the hell with you, we're going to stay. No, we got to go. And so all of those issues, I think, are brought to bear. And it was very interesting. So I was tweeting some stuff earlier, and Mark Davis is a conservative radio talk show host out of Dallas, and I had sent some tweets, targeting him, asking him some questions, and what I found to be interesting when I hit him, he goes, is the distrust. Let me find the tweet. I thought it was pretty funny, because when he asked the question about the distrust of Trump, and he essentially said, is the distrust of Trump this high? And I said point blank, Mark, I can't trust nothing this man says. Julian, I literally can't trust. I cannot trust the Trump administration when they say we took this action because of this. Because this is the same man who pissed on the exact same intelligence community when it came to Russia interfering with the election. So which is it? Oh, now I believe them, and no, I don't. Not only that, we've been given two different answers. We've been told the State Department and the Pentagon has given two different answers on what happened. State Department, there was an imminent threat. Pentagon, no, it was a response to what just took place. Okay, if it's both, say it's both. But don't give me two different answers to exactly why something took place. And again, that's the issue here. Normally, we are trusting the person occupying the Oval Office to make decisions in the best interest of Americans. I can't trust anything this man says. Nothing. I can't trust anything. And that's why you have a level of distrust, because this is a man who lies about basic stuff, who literally at the rally he held today with the evangelicals lied about, I got rid of the Johnson Amendment. No, you didn't. It's still law. You didn't get rid of it. That's a lie. And that's part of the issue here. You cannot trust what comes out of this man's mouth. And that's why anything he does, the motives are always questioned. Just a reality. Going to a break, we come back. We'll talk about the evangelicals, the conservative evangelicals meeting with Trump in Florida today. But it's very interesting because they love talking about evangelicals for Trump. Why don't you just go ahead and say white conservative evangelicals? Because certainly black folks don't feel the same way. Black evangelicals don't feel the same way about Trump as other folks do. Also, Tavis Smiley going to court against PBS after he was fired, they say because of sexual impropriety. He says, I can't wait for my day in court. That's next, Roland Martin Unfiltered. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. All right, folks, as the marijuana momentum continues, the folks at marijuanastock.org have already reached more than half of their funding goal for the hemp CBD investment. That's right. If you want to take advantage of this great opportunity, you need to do it now because it won't last much longer. Now, if you don't know, I'm talking about the hemp plant, the good cousin of marijuana with a much higher concentration of CBD. That means hemp gives you all the medical benefits of marijuana without getting you high. Also, if you don't know, hemp farming is now legal in the U.S., creating one of the largest commodities worldwide. Now, it's an opportunity for you to invest, and that's where 420 Real Estate comes in. Their business model is very simple. They buy land that supports hemp CBD grow operations and lease it to licensed, high-paying tenants. They're hemp CBD landlords. You can get in on the action. Now, of course, what they're doing is allowing you to invest a minimum of $200 up to $10,000 in their crowdfunding campaign. That's right, $200 up to $10,000. Now, to invest, all you got to do is go to marijuanastock.org. It's marijuanastock.org. And then you'll see all the details. So you want to get in the game and get in the game now. All right, folks, today, Donald Trump held this big old rally with these white conservative evangelicals in Florida after Christianity Today wrote a scathing editorial saying it's time for him to get bounced because he's morally bankrupt. Now, he chose to have this rally there, and they were there praying for Donald Trump and all that sort of stuff along those lines. And you had folks like Tony Perkins, who's big-time white conservative evangelical, who's out there tweeting as well. And so he tweeted something that I, of course, took offense to, and I had to respond to him when he did. And so this is his tweet right here. Great turnout in Miami for the Evangelicals for Trump coalition launch. His strong record on life and religious liberty makes him a clear choice for evangelicals in 2020. Now, let me be real clear. He's not a clear choice for evangelicals in 2020. He's a clear choice for white conservative evangelicals in 2020. See, there's a difference. Because the reality is, black evangelicals are not supporting Donald Trump. See, part of the problem with these white evangelicals that they have basically hijacked the name evangelical. They've even caused national media that when they have a discussion about evangelicals, they automatically go to these white conservative evangelicals, as if black folks and Latinos who are evangelical or Asians are not included in this same conversation. That, to me, is one of the fundamental problems that we have here. What's also interesting, just so y'all know, that these same white conservative evangelicals, they don't want to actually have a conversation with black folks, Latinos, and other white folks who are not in their same camp. Let me help you all out. When Reverend Dr. William Barber and the Poor People's Campaign went to Liberty, Virginia, where Liberty University is, founded by Reverend Jerry Falwell, now run by his son, Jerry Falwell Jr., who's an attorney, not a pastor. Jerry Falwell Jr. sent a letter out saying that if any person, if any individual with the Poor People's Campaign stepped foot on the campus of Liberty University, they were to be arrested. He ordered every student that no student or faculty at the university should even attend this event led by the Poor People's Campaign. What does that tell you about how these white conservative evangelicals think? Not only that, Reverend Barber, Reverend Jim Wallace, and others who call themselves progressive Christians have offered to debate these white conservative evangelicals. Folks like Jerry Falwell Jr. and Tony Perkins and Ralph Reed and Robert Jeffers and others. They've declined. What does that tell you, Mustafa, when you see what's going on here? Trump's hardcore base are these white conservative evangelicals who only care about two things: same-sex marriage and abortion. They don't give a damn about anything else. Those are the two most important things they care about, and that's why they also want these hardcore right-wing judges on the federal bench. As Franklin Graham said, they will be actually ruling on policy when I'm no longer here.
Yeah, it's interesting. We look back at Scripture, and Judas sold out Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. If you think about that in today's times, how people are literally selling themselves out for a Supreme Court judgeship, or selling themselves out so that there can be these inhuman immigration policies, or even if you want to have the conversation around abortion rights and those types of things. That's the reason that folks don't want to actually have a real conversation, a debatable conversation, one, on Scripture, but two, on, if you say that you're a follower of Jesus, what the reflection of that should actually look like and should be. And, you know, that's the reason folks don't want to deal with Reverend Barber, because they know, one, he understands the book, but he also understands what humanity is actually supposed to look like.
Julian, here's what's interesting. Go to my iPad, please. Poverty grew in almost half of Pennsylvania counties despite strong national economy. You will not hear these white conservative evangelicals talking about this here. They don't want anything to do with the Poor People's Campaign. They will stand there and talk about, oh, how they love Jesus, but they love that Trump tax cut. They love deregulation, but you will not hear him. And what did Jesus talk more about in the Bible than anything else? Money, the poor. These folks don't give a damn about the poor.
Who do black evangelicals follow?
Black evangelicals actually, I believe, broaden the notion of what it means to be a person of faith. I think black evangelicals do not define the faith based upon who's gay and who's pro-choice or who's pro-life. I think black evangelicals look at, how do you care for the poor? Look at, how do you treat your brethren? And I'll give you an example. Pastor Maurice Watson, when he was in Omaha, Nebraska, a group of white conservative evangelicals came to him, loved his pro-life stance. He's now a preacher here at Metropolitan in D.C. Came to him and said, we want you to participate with us in our pro-life march. He said, sure, not a problem. But I need y'all to do something for me. They said, what? He said, I need you to march with me against these crack houses in our neighborhoods. You know what the white preachers in Omaha, Nebraska said? Oh, no. That's your problem. See, that right there, I think, defines the difference between black evangelicals and white conservative evangelicals.
I think religion has its place in politics, but I don't agree with it when you use it, when you pick and choose how you use it. I think if you're going to be fair and reasonable across the board for everybody, just be fair and reasonable across the board for everybody. So I don't like when people pick certain verses out of the Bible and use it against you to make you feel bad, but at the same time, they don't adhere to those same principles. So I think, it should be fair and reasonable across the board, because I've seen black pastors that don't want to support gay marriage, and they have that right to do so. And I asked them, I'm like, okay, where do you stand on certain issues? We can't just overlook that. And the same goes for, the white evangelicals. You can't say, hey, we support this and not support that.
See, these white evangelicals, these white conservative evangelicals, what they want far right-wing judges on the federal bench, Dr. Carter. Mm-hmm. And we've already seen the whole deal here. Many of these folks, they are against civil rights.
Yep.
They support voter suppression. They rule for big business and against folk. And so what these evangelicals are doing, these white conservative evangelicals, and yes, it's a sprinkle of black, it's a sprinkle of Latino, and what they're doing on the Latino side, the reason they get more Latinos who are evangelicals is because of the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. Because the Catholic Church is opposed to abortion. The Catholic Church is also opposed to the death penalty. Mm-hmm. Not these folks.
Right. Well, I mean, look, I think the thing about white evangelicals, and they can wrap themselves in the cloak of Christianity if they want to, their ideology is white supremacy. What they really want is to preserve the lives of white children, right? This is why they get their cockles up about abortion, and they get their cockles up about gay marriage. I mean, they can use black faces for billboards. I remember they were doing that a few years ago, saying the most dangerous place for a black child is in the womb, or some nonsense like that.
They're still doing it.
Right, to bring in black folks. But let's be clear. These people don't want to do anything to sustain life beyond being born, right? They are not about anti-poverty. They're not about clean environment, right? Clean water. They don't care about any of those things. They certainly don't care about the unfair application of the death penalty to black and brown folks who are more likely to die, right, by those means. So they don't care about life per se, right? What they care about is making sure that they can extend their lives and their beliefs beyond their time. And let's be clear, most people don't believe what they believe in, right? But they found someone who can say, I care about pro-life, and I care about, a heterosexually defined marriage, and that to them is the litmus test. All of the other things that come with sustaining life, they don't care about. So I always say, when these people say they're Christian, I say, well, the God they serve is a white, blue-eyed Jesus, right? It's not a God of all of us. And in their minds, this world and the world that they want to leave behind is going to be the world that best produces white people and white children. And they are clear, I think, to me, from what they've said and in their deeds, right, that is what their main interest is. It's not about love. It's not about a more robust life, right,
no.
so that we can all live it abundantly. They don't care about those things.
In fact, Mustafa, I remember this vividly because I remember talking about this when I was on CNN. And so Bob Riley was the governor of Alabama, Republican, white, conservative, evangelical. He said that this was back in 2003 or 4. He said that the tax code, actually 2006 or 7, the tax code in Alabama was grossly unfair to the poor. So in Alabama, they started taxing people beginning at $4,600. One of the lowest thresholds of any state in the country. he said, this makes no sense. If you're making $400 to $600, he said, you can't afford to be paying taxes. So he had this $1.2 billion tax package that was going to raise taxes on the wealthy and businesses and was going to cut taxes for poor families. What's interesting is that Chamber of Commerce supported the governor's proposal. In fact, what he also did was he used the Bible and what would Jesus do as a campaign theme. This person was interviewed. He said, I just don't think you can find a justification in the New Testament for taxing a family that makes $4,600 a year. He went all around the state proselytizing. What would Jesus do? It lost 65% at the ballot box. And those white evangelicals in Alabama, guess what? They voted with their pocketbooks against the poor and against this proposal. And that's what I keep trying to explain to people. Their faith is a buffet line. I'm gonna take one of those, and I'm gonna leave the rest. That's why I call them hypocrites, and that's why I call them out.
In the Bible Belt, making those types of decisions, it doesn't matter. It's not even in the Bible Belt. Far too many folks place the dollar over their spirituality, and it's very clear to see. And, you know, we all gonna have to answer for the decisions that we made and the actions that we made in one day.
Simple as that. And speaking of answering to that, Mike Bloomberg has a lot to answer for. At a recent campaign event in Alabama, the CBS News reporter, Tim Perry, asked Bloomberg, who's running for president on the Democratic side, about his previous support of how the investigation in the Central Park 5 case was handled. Listen to this.
We started talking about race, and a subject that's come up a lot is the Central Park 5. And when you were mayor of New York, you defended the city and the police department's handling of the Central Park 5 case. You argued that they both acted in good faith. Do you still believe that today? And do you think that
I really have no idea. I've read in the paper. I've been away from government for a long time. Apparently the courts have ruled that they did not commit a crime, and that's the final word, and we just have to accept that.
But
it isn't a question of what anybody believes.
At the time, you did not believe that, and so I'm saying have you changed your stance on that?
I think there was an awful lot of evidence presented at that time that they were involved. There's been questions since then about the quality of that evidence, and so I've been away from it for so long. I just really can't respond because I just don't remember. But there's been plenty written about it, and I'd suggest you go and read some of that.
I have never lived in New York City. I am a native of Houston, Texas. But do you think for a second that I don't remember this case? Do you think that somehow over the course of time I've forgotten the Central Park 5 case? That's like asking somebody black who grew up during Jim Crow, did you forget the Scottsboro Boys? But let me also explain to you why Michael Bloomberg is an absolute fraud with that answer. Because Mike Bloomberg, as mayor, opposed, let me say this loudly and clearly, Mike Bloomberg, as mayor, opposed a settlement for those young men. The only reason there was a settlement was because de Blasio was elected mayor. Mike Bloomberg is lying. To say you do not recall the details, to say, well, some evidence was presented and, you know, there were some questions, and then to say, well, we just have to accept the court's. Really? It was renewed as a result of the Ava DuVernay film on Netflix? So, Mike Bloomberg, are you telling us you were completely out of the loop on this one? Mustafa, I said this, the apology that he gave at Pastor A.R. Bernard's church on Stop and Frisk was BS. I don't accept it. I don't buy it. This man was defending Stop and Frisk as late as January of 2019, and all of a sudden you're telling me that in November of 2019 you found religion and now you see that it was bad? On this case here, this man simply, it is disqualifying the answers that he has given on this case, and it is no different than Trump defending his actions in this case as well.
You notice also words have power, and he said apparently. So apparently leaves this space for folks to still hang there and say, well, maybe they really were guilty, even though the DNA evidence said that they were not guilty. So, and here's the other thing that
matter of fact, let's do this here. I want to do this. I want you to play back what he said, 'cause I want people to actually listen to every single word that he said. And so I want you to play it, and then as soon as we come out of the break, come out of that, Mustafa's going to answer, Dr. Carter's going to answer, and then Julian's going to answer. So play it back exactly what Mike Bloomberg said about this.
We started talking about race, and a subject that's come up a lot is the Central Park Five. And when you were mayor of New York, you defended the city and the police department's handling of this Central Park Five case. You argued that they both acted in good faith. Do you still believe that today? And do you think that
I really have no idea. I've read in the paper. I've been away from government for a long time. So apparently the courts have ruled that they did not commit a crime, and that's the final word, and we just have to accept that.
But
it isn't a question of what anybody believes.
At the time, you did not believe that, and so I'm saying now, have you changed your stance on that?
I think there was an awful lot of evidence presented at that time that they were involved. There's been questions since then about the quality of that evidence, and so I've been away from it for so long. I just really can't respond because I just don't remember. But there's been plenty written about it, and I'd suggest you go and read some of that.
Yeah, so again, apparently, no, it's not apparently. The courts have cleared them, have said that they were innocent. The DNA evidence also cleared them. So here's the other thing. We see people who have huge amounts of wealth, and with that wealth comes the access to information. He is one of the most powerful people in the state of New York, probably one of the most powerful people in the United States of America. So you can't just say that I've been away from government for a while. It's not like you don't have the opportunity to know what's going on. And this was a significant issue in time in your city. And so you, of course, would be a part of the garnering of that information. And what you should do is, as we've said with other powerful folks, if you made a mistake in the past, admit it and say that I've grown, I've learned, and then be supportive of what that change is that's happened when that information comes out. And when you don't do that, it makes it look like you're being disingenuous, that you're being unauthentic in the responses that you're giving. So, we got to have people, as my grandmother says, when you know better, do better.
Yeah. But it's not just seeming right to be inauthentic. He is being inauthentic. He's lying, right? I mean, this man spent the better part of his administration fighting compensating these young men for their traumas, right? I mean, the city was wrong. It lied. They beat those boys into confessing. He knew this. Everybody knows this. And then, like you said, the way he kind of slyly put it in there so it makes it seem like, well, maybe they're guilty, but they were exonerated because the evidence was of poor quality. No, there is no DNA. There was one perpetrator. That perpetrator has been found. Unfortunately, these young men had to pay with their lives. And since they've been exonerated, you still have people like Michael Bloomberg and Donald Trump who want to say these young men, and at the time boys, were guilty. They're not guilty. They didn't do it. Full stop, right? And Michael Bloomberg spent $6 million of the city's money fighting, compensating these young men for what they went through. And if you ask me, him sitting here saying he can't recall should be the thing that we say, well, then you shouldn't be president. Because if you, at 77, when you were the mayor of that city for what, about 10 years, and you spent a huge time fighting the people of the city of New York, fighting these young men as citizens, right, of that space who have been so brutally treated by the criminal system, by your police department, everything on down, that you can't remember that, then you're clearly not with it. You're not ready for this job. This is not the experience for you.
And Julian, here's a timeline. 2002, the convictions were vacated. Bloomberg becomes mayor in 2002. He serves from 2002 to 2013. The settlement happens in 2014. So you're trying to tell me in one of the biggest stories in the city of New York in the second half of the 20th century, a case that the convictions were overturned, vacated when you took over, and the entire, all 3 terms of yours, this was an issue, and now I can't remember.
Honesty is the best policy. I think, well, I know. You know, at some point you just gotta just say, hey, I made a mistake. This was my standpoint on it back then. Looking at the evidence, we have DNA. It proves that they were innocent. I apologize. These young men should have never been convicted. They should have never been charged. I want to fully apologize to those young men. That's what should happen. You know, I think the president, he should apologize, but at the end of the day, the president is his own person. He's going to speak and do whatever he wants to do.
And to Dr. Carter's point, the settlement was $41 million.
True.
Bloomberg spent $6 million of taxpayer dollars fighting the settlement. So the settlement actually cost New York taxpayers almost $50 million.
Right. He should just admit to it. You know, just admit, hey, I made a mistake. Yes, I remember. I didn't want to talk about it. So sometimes honesty is the best policy, and apologizing shows humility.
But can we also get him to apologize for the stop and frisk? Because after all those years...
Well, no, he claims he apologized.
No, he didn't.
At Bernard's church.
Yeah, we saw it.
All I'm saying is this here.
The one-on-one...
I can't wait for Michael Bloomberg to sit down and do an interview with some black folk.
Oh, that's not happening. That's not happening.
He apologized. What was it, a one-on-one interview?
No. It was at he went to Pastor A.R. Bernard's church, where he spoke and he shared his thoughts, and now I've come to realize...
No. He had to sit down with somebody about that.
No, actually, he didn't. He ain't sat down with nobody. He ain't sat down.
But coming to realize when black and brown people in that city had been telling you for years that this is hurting us, stop doing this, and you doubled down on it, right? So you're sorry. Well, what's the point? You did the damage. Now you've hurt all these people. Now I don't care about your sorry. And really, he should have been taking money out of his own pocket and compensating the city of New York for that $6 million lawsuit, because he was bound and determined that those young men would not receive a dime after their exoneration.
Yep. Not buying it. All right, folks. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam filed a request for a bill that would replace Virginia's statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee in the U.S. Capitol building. The filing came after Democratic Virginia lawmakers Jennifer Wexton and A. Donald McEachin both requested that Northam prioritize removing the Lee statue. They also recommended a number of Virginians who could replace Lee, including educator and orator Booker T. Washington and civil rights attorney Oliver Hill. Robert Edward Lee was a Confederate soldier, best known as a commander of the Confederate States Army. He commanded the Army of Northern Virginia in the American Civil War from 1862 until his surrender in 1865. Julian, well, a lot of people don't realize when you come to the U.S. Capitol, there's a statuary hall. Each state is given the opportunity to place 2 statues in Statuary Hall. Every state gets 2. A couple of years ago, Florida, they had a statue that was of a Confederate leader. Mm-hmm. They passed the bill, removed it, and it was replaced with Mary McLeod Bethune.
Okay.
It's embarrassing to go to Statuary Hall and to walk through there, and you're seeing these statues, and to be a black kid, or frankly any kid from Virginia, and when you walk through, and if you want to take a photo in front of the 2 statues from your home state, one of them is a Confederate general, Robert E. Lee.
My question is, which part of history do we accept? Which part of history are we going to acknowledge? So if we're going to remove the Robert E. Lee statue, why not remove George Washington? George Washington had slaves.
Oh, hold up. Hold up. Let's be real clear. You don't get no argument from me.
What I'm saying is, I don't want to pick and choose parts of history trying to erase it.
But they are. But they are. See, first of all, what they've done is the people who support these statues, they've lied. They've lied all these years. Because see, and what's interesting is that you have folks like Dinesh D'Souza, who wants to brand Democrats as the party of the KKK, who wants to say it was Democrats who backed Jim Crow, yet the people today who are supporting Confederate statues are Republicans. Now, the problem is that, again, there's history and there's his story. What we have been subjected to has been his story and not history. These statues, for the most part, were built in order to remind black people of slavery. They lost. The fact that you have so many statues of traitors, of domestic terrorists, folks who lost, and not understanding why they were erected. This statue and others were erected because white racists wanted to say, y'all are not going to forget your place, and we're going to remind you of what the world should have been had we won. That's the problem here.
So you're saying those statues need to be removed.
What I'm saying is this here.
But if presidents who owned slaves, like Washington, like Hamilton, should their statues be removed as well?
First of all, Hamilton was never president. That's first.
So should Washington's statue stay?
Well, first of all, Washington doesn't have a statue; it's a monument.
Should his monument stay?
So here's the piece. First of all, the monument is not going to get torn down, but you can remove a statue.
True.
But the reality is, those statues, other statues have been removed. States get to vote on removing statues. Dr. Carter, I'm supportive of this. And I ain't forgot Northern. I ain't forgot your black face.
Right.
Don't think for a second that I forgot your black face. Right. But the bottom line is, this needs to go.
Well, this is a place of honor, right? This is where each state gets to send who they think are the best representatives of that state. Virginia chose in the 20th century, right? They didn't pick this in the 19th century. They chose this in, I think, like the early part of the 20th century, Robert E. Lee as the best representation of Virginia, right? Because they thought a Confederate loser, right, and a secessionist and a slave owner and all the other things was the best representative that their state had.
They still honor him every year.
Absolutely they do. I mean, they have a number of streets named after Confederates. I mean, like, Virginia is all in on
Jefferson Davis Highway,
Absolutely.
The greatest domestic terrorist in U.S. history.
They still do it. And so I think, if we're talking about symbols and how things matter, yes, it does matter that Virginia is still upholding Robert E. Lee as a best representative of what their state has to offer. When, if you think about it, right, he's the person that lost. And he's a traitor to his country, right? And he's all these other things that we can say. I don't know many other places that have statues to losers.
Well, let me give you one. So when I used to visit my grandmother in Clarksburg, West Virginia, there is in the center of town a statue of Stonewall Jackson.
Ooh.
who fought for the Confederacy.
Absolutely.
He was born in West Virginia, but West Virginia went with the North, so they fought for the Union, as everybody here knows, and hopefully all the viewers do. And yet, I remember that was one of the areas where there was at least a handful of black folks. So when you go in northern West Virginia, there's only a couple of cities that got a handful of black folks. And to actually have that as the symbol there says something about the change that needs to happen. And there it is.
Well, this is the statue. So when you come to the United States Capitol and you walk in that hall and you see all of these statues representing each state of the Union, this is one of the two that represents the state of Virginia. And I say, yeah, remove it, put the damn thing in a museum somewhere, but that should not be representative of the state of Virginia. And if you are a black kid in Virginia, there's no way in hell, when I go to the U.S. Capitol, I want to be able to say, oh, two of the best that we can send was this Confederate general who was a vicious, nasty slaveholder. And that's what he was. Ain't gonna be rewriting the history, folks. That's called history, not his story. All right, folks, let's go to our other story here, and that is a New York police officer, Michael Reynolds, who was sentenced last month in Tennessee for a racist tirade and break-in the home of an African-American family, has resigned from the force. Now, calls for his firing, of course, yeah, he's white, have grown since he was sentenced December 6th in the rampage at the Nashville home in 2018. Online petition drew 12,000 signatures. Now, Reynolds pleaded no contest to charges of aggravated criminal trespassing and assault. He broke into the home near the Airbnb where he was staying, yelling racist slurs and threats at Conice Halliburton and her 4 sons. Halliburton's youngest sons were reportedly 8 and 11 at the time. Guys, he was only sentenced to 15 days in jail and 3 years of probation. This is the call here. Go ahead and play it. 15 days. Yeah, he should have lost his damn job and hopefully does not get a pension. All right, folks, former talk show host Tavis Smiley has lost a bid to throw out PBS's lawsuit that accuses him of violating his contract by having sex with his subordinates. Smiley's attorneys argue that PBS was trying to punish him for behavior that long predated his current contract. But in a ruling on Thursday, D.C. Superior Court Judge Yvonne Williams disagreed, finding that PBS had also claimed more recent misconduct. PBS canceled Tavis's show after receiving a complaint of sexual misconduct in late 2017. Smiley sued PBS in February 2018, accusing PBS of conducting a sham investigation and of dismissing him based on racial bias. PBS countersued, alleging that Smiley had violated his morals clause and had engaged in financial impropriety. A trial is currently scheduled for February 10th. Now, folks, what's interesting about this is that after this happened, PBS launched an investigation when they put together this 500-page report detailing all sorts of lurid details with regards to Tavis Smiley's conduct when he had his show. He argued, and this is very interesting, he argued that, first of all, and the way this was set up, people don't realize, so Tavis was not an employee of PBS. He owned his company that produced the show in conjunction with the PBS station in Los Angeles, and it was aired on PBS stations nationally. And so he said that his company had no rules about folks dating in the workplace. So his whole point was, how are you telling me how I should run my company? What my rules are. They say they actually violated those rules. He did release a comment. Let me pull up in a second. His representatives sent me an email. Let me pull it up. Howard Bragman, who is an attorney, publicist there, he did comment. I'm gonna pull this up in a second, but just what are your thoughts again on this lawsuit and Tavis taking it further, and now this 500-page report is going to be entered into the public record.
Well, this might have been one of those moments where you cut your losses, only because if half of what we've been able to read so far is true, it doesn't look good. And even if these relationships were consensual, as Tavis Smiley is alleging, I think it's hard to toe that line when you are the boss. your HR and everything else in that company, right? So if I have a problem with you, say the relationship fails or say it doesn't work out, who do I go to, right? There's nobody to talk to about retaliation. I think it's just bad business, right? In addition to the sexual harassment stuff, which I think is separate from his conduct as a business owner, right? Because if you are my subordinate, how much consent is there really, right? If you work for me, do you really have the right to say no? And is that yes a real yes? I think this is why companies and businesses have policies against having an owner or someone who's a superior date a subordinate, because that consent piece gets really murky and really tricky, and that's across industries. It's not just television. I mean, it's also universities, et cetera. I mean, I'm at a university with a very explicit policy against faculty dating students, right? Because this can get really sticky very quickly for those kinds of places. So I just think beyond the sexual misconduct allegations that are being alleged, there is this other part about how you conduct business. And this sounds insane, right? That you would date people that work for you, right? They're not people who just work with you. They're people who work for you, and whether those people were really giving a real consent. It's not saying it's rape, right? I think there's a lot of real estate between coercion and rape. But I think the fact that you have relationships, ongoing sexual relationships in the workplace with people who work with you, saying that it's consensual doesn't really hold water when you are the head honcho, right? When you are the person that gets to make all the shots.
Mustafa.
We talk about power all the time on this show in lots of different ways and power dynamics. And when you're in a position of power, you cannot put yourself in that type of situation. And just like my grandma say, when you know better, you do better.
Hopefully.
I think it's a conflict of interest just for the simple fact you are the owner. So you have employees that work for you. So I don't look at it as consensual from the standpoint of you using a person's job against them. If you don't do this, then I'm going to fire you or
Right.
or
Now, he
write you
claims
up.
he didn't.
But
They say he did.
But if they have that policy where there's no relationships with subordinates, if it's a zero tolerance policy, and it presents a conflict of interest,
but again,
you shouldn't do it.
But here's the piece, though. Again, when you have your own company, you can make your own rules.
But you have the most to lose.
No, I understand that. No, I get it. So, but what I'm saying, though, is you do have a right. Your company have your own rules. There's nothing that says you have to outlaw relationships between folks who work in the workplace. But the reality is, I think many HR experts will tell you that you probably want to do that. And again, and then also, if you say, hey, you can work in a company in different departments and you can be together, but when you talk about when you're the CEO,
and the HR department and everything else in between,
Right.
there is no place, there is no recourse. And lots of companies have policies where you can disclose the relationship to HR and then they kind of work through that legal side. But I think more than that, too, I mean, like you said, the PBS part of this, I think is also interesting because PBS also has stakes here, right? It's also their reputation. People don't understand television, right? That they're just the distributor of a show that he produces and owns, and that's separate from them, right? People see the entity PBS and they think this is a PBS thing, right? So if somebody is getting sued, if somebody is running his name through the mud, then PBS invariably is going to come in there somewhere, is either part of the lawsuit or part of the conversation. I mean, it was sort of the same thing with Showtime and Lena Waithe and talking about what was happening on The Chi, right? I mean, she's like, I don't own that show, right? That's Showtime show.
Now, different there. Again, how that was set up,
But I mean, everybody gets pulled into the conversation, whether who owns what. And I think for PBS, it's sort of like, let's exercise an ounce of caution here and let's not pursue this any longer because this relationship is looking like it's going to be a problem for us. And as a public broadcasting entity, they might have different considerations than, say, a larger network or some other kind of entities. I don't know. I think this is where the technical TV side comes in. But I can imagine them not wanting to be put in the same conversation with sexual harassment, especially in this moment that we're in now where everybody is sort of kind of on alert and more sensitive. And I think for the better. But certainly, I think if they have an image to protect and an image to uphold, this relationship was no longer serving them and it had to go.
This is the statement here. I'm going to pull it up. Tavis Smiley dropped this comment on his Facebook page. Go to my iPad, please. A weak case you play in the press, a strong case you play out in a court of law. I look forward to my day in court February 10th, which I have finally been granted after 2 years of fighting. Julian?
I think at the end of the day, you can't shit where you eat. You know, you don't jeopardize your livelihood for convenience, especially when that convenience is a conflict of interest. There are plenty of people you can date outside of the workplace rather than jeopardizing that type of environment.
And I will also say, I mean,
Look,
you know,
I made it clear to anybody. I'm like, look, if anybody ever accused me of something, it's gonna be like, he a hard ass. He
didn't touch me.
He tough.
He didn't touch
me. Oh, you can hang that up. Cause look, I don't even. Let me be real clear. I don't even hug folk. Let me tell you something. When I my TV One show,
you give me a fist
folks,
bump.
No. Folks are like, oh, give me a hug. No, I don't hug. My deal is, I am not gonna sit here and any of this sort of stuff. And again, when you listen to, when you look at again some of the details, and yes, this is of course this is the PBS report that they actually put together. Variety had a story earlier where they talked about it, where they laid out some of those details. But according to PBS, he had multiple sexual encounters with subordinates, made unfavorable comments about PBS in TV appearances. Misconduct allegations took place in 2015, 2016, 2017.
Question.
They also, hold on one second. One woman told the investigators that Smiley refused to write a letter recommendation for her unless she came to his house at 11 p.m. She refused. She also said that when she came by his house one time, he wasn't wearing pants, asked her to have a threesome with him and a female employee. He's denied that. He also said that he hates women. Quote, these women owe me because no one else will hire them. Another woman told investigators she had a sexual relationship with Tavis Smiley, despite her concern that it would hurt her career. And then also, the investigator also interviewed Tavis Smiley, who, according to their report, admitted to having relationships with some employees, said it wasn't misconduct. The investigator concluded that Tavis was not truthful, and his denials conflicted with numerous other witness accounts. And so, again, when you look at this, also this Variety story says Smiley's own attorneys filed the documents, including the PBS. So Tavis's own attorneys, they're the ones who filed the PBS investigative report. And apparently they were removed from the court docket on Friday morning. And so that's interesting that his own attorneys would put that report into the record, which actually makes him look really bad. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say this. I mean, some of these relationships can be characterized as dating. These other things are just harassment, right? This is not dating.
So it's a combination of that.
It's two separate.
Some said it was consensual. Some who said it was consensual said, yeah, but I felt like my job was on the line.
They were
Other
coerced.
complaints said, well, the other women felt
They felt
other
coerced.
women said, look, they felt it was wrong because, okay, is so-and-so getting a promotion because they're sleeping with him and then I'm not? So all of those things were part of this, but it goes to trial next month.
Yeah.
You said Tavis Smiley owned his own company, so he utilized PBS as platform, correct?
Yeah, so what happens is
there a contract?
Well, yeah.
Yes.
What happens is when you do a show with PBS, you actually do a show, your production company does it in partnership with a local PBS affiliate.
Right.
Okay? So that was the PBS affiliate in Los Angeles. And then you're able to do a national distribution deal with PBS and their stations across the country. But yeah, there is a contract. There's a contract.
That states what he allegedly done.
They said that there's a morals clause in their contract and he was in violation.
That's what PBS says.
That's what they're alleging.
That's what I'm getting at. If that is the case, then I don't see how he has a legitimate case for the simple fact, if you sign something knowingly and willingly and say, hey, I didn't agree to that, well, your signature's right here, so you signed it.
Look, bottom line is going to trial next month.
Yes.
Unless there's some sort of settlement. I don't think there's going to be one. There's been lots of bad blood between PBS and Tavis for quite some time. And remember, after he lost his gig, he announced that he was supposed to be doing these shows with the Word Network and was launching a digital show. None of that ever came to pass as well. And so we'll see what happens. So pretty much, I mean, since this went off the air, you really haven't seen much of Tavis Smiley anywhere. The book imprint, he was supposed to do a stage play tied around his book on the final year of King's life that was launching, I think it was like around November 2018, leading up to MLK 50, actually 2017, leading up to MLK 50. That never happened as well. And so we certainly shall see. All right, folks, I've got to go. We certainly thank all of you for watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Please support what we do. Every dollar you give goes to support this show, to make this show possible. So you can pay via Cash App. You can join our Bring the Funk fan club, which gives you discounts to items on RolandSMartin.com. And so we got some great stuff lined up for you as well that we're working on. As you see, this is one of the outfits that I had made when I was in Ghana. This is called the Nkrumah Kente. So every time you see a piece of Kente cloth, it's actually named. There's a meaning behind it. And so Kwame Nkrumah, of course, was the first president of Ghana. So this Kente is called the Nkrumah Kente. So I want to thank the folks at Charisma in Accra, Ghana, who made this outfit. They got some other stuff that I'm making, but y'all see all that later. And I got one that's black and gold. You really love that, Mustafa.
It's what?
You can't wear that one.
What? You know what?
You can't wear that one.
Seen you in a while.
And trust me, there is absolutely no Kente fabric I got.
I got this for you. Happy belated Founders Day.
There's no Kente fabric that I got that's purple and gold. I'm going to let you know that.
But
None.
you know, purple is royalty, so it's okay.
No.
It's okay.
Well, you can call it whatever you want to call it.
But it's true, though.
Bottom line is, y'all couldn't be creative when you took one of our colors.
Really?
I thought so. We were black and old gold first.
Okay. Enjoy your
Who's your daddy?
Founders Day.
I don't even know what that is.
It's the bandana. You know what it is.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you do. Yeah,
no, I don't.
You act like you don't know.
No, I don't.
Would you like it, sir?
I'm fine.
Oh, go.
No, right. Because, see, alphas, we don't call each other animal names. That's y'all who are dogs. That's right. We grown-ass men. All right, y'all. Go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Join our Bring the Funk fan club to support what we do. Independent, black-owned. That's the way it should be. We're able to speak truth to power, and we got to ask nobody's opinion to do so. I'll see you guys on Monday right here. Have a fabulous weekend. Oh, by the way, before I go, this weekend, now, y'all, I don't watch the NFL, but I did have to say something about Henry Peterson and his poor little Cowboys. In fact,
I'm a Cowboys fan.
You a Cowboy fan? I'm gonna add you to it.
Well, go ahead.
In fact, y'all, is this the phone here?
Twitter,
so I went to Giant earlier. Had to get some fruit. I started the D-Herbs 21-day cleanse. Y'all, I saw the most pitiful looking thing I have ever seen. Which phone is it on? I just got to show y'all this here before we go. Pull the music down. I'm gonna end the show in 1 second, but I got to go ahead and show this here because y'all gonna get a kick out of this here. So I'm going through. I'm in the parking garage, and y'all, the car next to me. I saw this and I just busted out laughing when I saw this. Henry, go to my iPad. Y'all, somebody actually had a little limp Cowboys car flag flying on their car. I tweeted this out, and Mark Lamont Hill said they should be at a half mast. That's what he said. And of course, you know, the polar Dallas Cowboy did make the playoffs. 8-8.
The sun shines on dog butt every night.
I'm just saying.
You can't win them all.
I'm just saying. I understand you can't win them all, but y'all didn't win many of them. And so it's a little rough. It's a little rough for you Cowboy fans. I understand. And see, now that I know you're Cowboy fans, that just make it worse. So you know, Mega and a Cowboy fan. Oh, that's trifling. And so.
And your team is.
And so any of y'all, I'm from Houston.
You from Houston?
We're in the playoffs.
Y'all ain't gonna get far.
Are we in?
Okay, but
are y'all at home?
It's okay.
Oh yeah.
How far you think?
Matter of fact,
who does Houston play this weekend?
Buffalo. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and show y'all this here.
Who does Houston play?
Buffalo. Stephen A. Smith posted this one here. Let me go ahead. I just want to this is the last one I'm gonna show y'all because I know Henry right now is paying having to direct the show. He's a huge Cowboy fan, and so Stephen A. Smith hit this out. All my Cowboy players, where's the best place to sit for the playoffs? So that right there that's for y'all. Because I just want to go ahead and just, you know, there's lots of room on the couch.
How many
for y'all to enjoy.
y'all have?
Hold on, really? You want to show that one?
I mean, how many
you know what?
you know what?
I'm glad you brought that up.
How many Super Bowl
I'm glad you brought that up because my man, this is the last one right here. My man Eton Thomas sent this out yesterday, and y'all, this right here. Go ahead, pull that up.
Nights like this, I'll be raindropping Nights like this, I can't write the
You opened it up, bro. You should have opened it up.
Nights like this, I wish raindrops would fall.
I was not going to play that. But the moment you brought up your bunch of Super Bowls that took place before my nieces were born, that was just so. Eton Thomas, I appreciate you tweeting that out there. But Julian, and just so y'all know, when I was playing, Julian was like, "Damn, that was." He said that was a good one right there. That was a good one. Yes,
That was a good one.
all right, y'all. As we always end every Friday, of course, showing the folks who contributors to Roland Martin Unfiltered. We want to thank all of you, including you Cowboy fans out there. We surely appreciate it. Thanks a lot. I'll see you guys on Monday. Holla!